Tom's control over Kansas City was unparalleled, and yet more power was on its way, along with some alliances that were unsavory to say the least. Specifically, organized crime insinuated itself into the machine in the form of Johnny Lazia, boss of the North Side Italians and the frontman for Kansas City's sinister mafia.
What was said about Lazia, he was the first to come out of the North End as a recognizable racketeer leader.
On May 8, 1928, Kansas City held a bond election, a fairly routine event. Lazia thugs kidnapped 4 Pendergast poll workers and held them hostage for the day. Lazia demanded of Pendergast that the North Side Italians in the First Ward be given home rule, control of Democratic political activities there, and that Johnny Lazia be their leader. At first, TJ resisted, but came to realize he could not go to war with the Italians, and their willingness to kidnap Pendergast loyalists demonstrated to what lengths they would go to get their way. Pendergast assented to Lazia becoming the North End political boss, and thereafter, the machine and organized crime were intertwined. The machine and mob's utopia for crime control envisaged an orderly and happy society in which gamblers flourished, speakeasies and nightclubs thrived, bootleggers and rum runners kept their appointments without fear of interruption, while bandits, hijackers, burglars, thieves, and murderers were suppressed. In return for cooperation from government, the gambling, liquor, and prostitution interests would work to discourage petty crime, to allow the police to concentrate full-time regulating traffic and investigating robberies and homicides and other serious felonies.
The lug was a tax, a fee, a kickback, whatever you want to call it, that was charged to all criminal enterprises. If you wanted to operate, you paid. If you didn't, we closed you down. And that money flowed into the coffers of the machine and of the criminal organization. And as a result, Tom Pendergast wasn't a collector. He had his niche and his outward appearance as a political person. So it was left to the organization to be the collectors, the enforcers, and what have you. And that became a source of power and influence. Everything that went on, Lazia knew about.
40 dance halls and more than 100 speakeasies and nightclubs operated during the Pendergast era, offering floor shows, dancers, comedians, and some of the best blues and jazz heard anywhere in America. The Benny Moten Orchestra, Andy Kirk and his Clouds of Joy, Walter Page and the Blue Devils, the Nighthawks, Count Basie and his Kansas City 7, trumpet maestro Hot Lips Page and blues singer Julia Lee at the Yellowfront Saloon. There was bookmaking and gambling happening all over. Slot machines were in drugstores, barbershops, and bars, and prostitutes in the notorious 14th and Cherry section of town, just a few blocks from the police department, would sit and tap at their windows with nickels at potential Johns prowling the neighborhood. When challenged about this, Boss Tom was unapologetic.
Well, the rich men have their clubs where they can gamble and have a good time. Would you deny the poor man an equal right? Ours is a fine, clean, and well-ordered town.
In 1927, Kansas City outmurdered Chicago with a homicide rate of 16 people for every 100,000, compared with 13.3 for Chicago. There were 1,178 holdups and 1,142 burglaries, or an average of more than 7 crimes a day. At this time, the Kansas City Police Department was under control of a state-run board of police commissioners. This did not sit well with Tom Pendergast, and so he sicked old turkey neck Henry McElroy on Police Chief John Miles to interfere and embarrass the man as he tried to enforce prohibition laws. McElroy objected to the size of the police budget, arbitrarily refused to pay certain expense bills, withheld wages of policemen for months, disrupted the police benefit fund, challenged the police uniform cleaning bill, and even quibbled over a bill of $15 for flowers to honor a slain officer. The police board went to court to force McElroy to release needed funds, and McElroy insisted on a long series of hearings before the Supreme Court finally ruled that the police board had the right to set its own budget. But then, in March 1932, the state Supreme Court justices delivered unexpectedly the gift of police department home rule to McElroy and the boss. The state-run KC Police Board was ruled unconstitutional because it delegated to the police board the right to tax without representation by setting its own budgets. That decision put police operations directly under the control of the Pendergast machine. McElroy pushed through the selection of former used car salesman and friend of Johnny Lazia, Eugene C. Reppert, as director of Kansas City Police, who quickly announced that his department would concentrate on suppression of major crimes and the cultivation of polite manners among traffic cops.
Johnny Lazia, as the story goes, if you called the chief's office, he would just as likely pick up the phone and answer it as the chief.
Lazia himself recruited 60 recently released prisoners from Leavenworth Penitentiary to restart their careers as police officers. From then on, police officers had to buy their own uniforms, guns, blackjacks, clubs, handcuffs, and raincoats. Police officers were paid $1,620 a year, and there were no pensions. After lugs and cuts, an officer netted less than $800 annually, which in turn fostered corruption within ranks as police accepted bribes for turning a blind eye toward illegal liquor, gambling, and prostitution in Kansas City. And woe be to any respectable person or business owner who deigned to challenge city operations under McElroy. An army of building inspectors, fire inspectors, tax auditors, and sanitation czars would harass honest businessmen who spoke out against the machine. Disfavored developers would wait a year for a permit. Water meter readers exaggerated usage. Delivery companies would see their drivers pinched 4 to 5 times a day for traffic violations.
Kansas City, in that era, when that came together as being absolutely, completely wide open, a city owned lock, stock, and barrel by a criminal political machine, duplicated in very few places. Chicago had the similar, but Kansas City was, I hate to use the word, was notorious. Writers from around the country looked at Kansas City and called it one of the most corrupt cities in the country.